And so at this point, item 6.1, which we had delayed, we'll bring that up now?
Sure.
Okay. Mr. Gillis, you're still on. As you can see, he's been working pretty hard, and he's put together the RFP for the Hull Community Walking Track and Turf Field. And so we put time on this agenda for a discussion. Mr. Gillis.
I put together an RFP. It's a request for proposals for designer services to design the project. And obviously, included in that, for most designers, they expect, to be there for construction oversight. Because if we're plans only, they might wonder why you would want to pay them for 75% of their work to have a bunch of paper that sits on a shelf. So I put together an RFP. I got some information from some designers from some other communities, and actually the RFP that I put out for retro commissioning. So I had some of the exact same forms and format of things, because requests for proposals are generally all the same. It's just the nature of the project that's specific that can change. If the school committee is fine with it, the publication will go out on Wednesday. It's been put into the Central Register, and it would be opened on November 24th, which would be 20 days from the day it's out there. I did speak with some designers as well as other communities, and 3 weeks, they said, seemed to be sufficient time to review the proposal and the requirements and see what they have for work lined up. There is an optional site visit, but with Google Earth, nowadays, folks don't have to come out. They can be looking at the field and telling me how many square feet it is while I'm talking to them on the phone. But would like to have them come out for an optional walkthrough on the 10th if they want to see the site and walk through it. And I basically put out there that we're looking for a synthetic turf field with a walking track, 2 or 3 lanes. It's a combination field of baseball/softball and rectangular sports, just so I didn't have to list them all. Football, soccer, lacrosse, field hockey. It's just easy to say rectangular sports played on a rectangular field. And then for the main criteria for evaluating them, I put in the firm's experience. I put in, that's the first criteria. We want a pro doing the job, I think. We want them to be, their projects to finish on time and on budget. Nobody likes those types of surprises when they don't. We want to evaluate their proposed plan and how it would meet Hull's needs. We want to know who the assigned project manager is for it and their years of experience. And we want to know about the assigned staff and how many years these folks have worked together doing this type of work. Timeline, kind of giving them a couple of options, but this is where you start to defer to the experts, in my opinion. You don't try to force something in that isn't really optimal to happen. So I'd like a group of them to tell us what's best. Usually when you start asking questions from qualified people, you tend to start getting pretty similar answers. If the answers are all over the map, then we'll, in my opinion, need to go back to the drawing board. But that's really a school committee decision. Just for myself, in any type of construction project that's meant to last the test of time, you want to do it right and you want to do it well. You don't want to race through it just so you can say that you did it. So the designers, it'll be part of their portfolio, and same with the contractors. So folks want to make sure that they can make this work in a timeline that's conducive to a good quality product for everybody. With that said, I guess, any questions or any suggestions for the RFP from the committee?
Sure, I'd like to start. Just to take it back just one step first. Obviously, there's a lot of controversy around this project, and we talked a little bit about that at our last meeting. But I just want to make very clear to everyone that at this point in the process, there are really only 2 things that are definite. And that is that the cost of this project will not exceed the $1.925 million that was appropriated at town meeting, subject to passage of a debt exclusion. And that the other item that's determined is that it will be for the construction of a community walking track and turf field. Nothing else has been determined at this point. No particular product, no builder, no designer, no nothing. The entire project at this point is in the 100% control and purview of the school committee, and we will be the ones to do the due diligence to get all of the information that is required to get this designed, permitted in the most appropriate way, and make the best case for what those facts are to the town well in advance of town meeting in May, well in advance of a vote on the debt exclusion. One of the ways that we're going to be going about this is through the RFP process. I think under the circumstances, we're not required to do that, but it is definitely in everyone's best interest for us to go about that way. The 5 members of the school committee will be the ones with final say on, you know, the language of the RFP, on picking the bids, all of those sorts of things. So with that, if anybody has any questions for Matt.
Matt, I think you did a great job just, on the RFP. I kind of read through it. I was actually kind of impressed with some of the questions as far as how you would actually award the contract. And the only thing that I was wondering, I'm not sure if this would come under the RFP process of choosing a designer, or whether you, once you've chosen the designer, and then when they put it out to bid to the contractors, you put it in. But I wasn't sure if we could put something in there about designing a field with the rubber pellets or the rubber stuff or whatever it's called, and then, or whether we
Tire
should use the
crumble.
cork. So I wasn't sure if we could kind of give them an and/or scenario here, or you do that during the actual bid process for the construction.
You actually really do that during the construction document development
Okay.
phase.
All right.
The way I would envision this is that we put out the RFP, we rank them, and then we have a couple of firms, or 3 or 4 firms, depending on how the committee feels, in for interviews, and we ask them their experience with different types of products and what they recommend. And they generally have worked with more than several types of products and will have opinions, and we'll want to hear what the committee has to say and what we have to say. And so whether it would be a cork or rubber or a type of pad that, used to be in vogue before the crushed rubber tire crumble, or rubber pellets, or the cork. I mean, I also heard, walnuts is one issue, which I said, oh, great, there's an allergy thing to worry about. That's where I think instead of telling them exactly what we want to hear what's best, what works well from the people that do this for a living year-round and have been doing it for multiple years. That's just my recommendation to the
No, that sounds
committee.
good. That was the one question I wasn't kind of sure, like, whether we should put that in the RFP or wait, but I think that your explanation
Yeah,
actually makes sense.
for me, it's always about performance when it comes to products, and not about a specific brand or brand name. So how long do we want it to last? What do we want it to do? And how safe is it going to be on a number of different levels? So, those are the types of things where I think you need the designer to give you some specific answers. And if you're interviewing several of them, we should be getting some of the same answers, is what I anticipate from the professionals in the field. I mean, there seems to be a handful of folks that do this in Massachusetts and in New England that seem to have a decent-sized portfolio of public and private schools.
Okay.
Dr. Steele?
Matt, could you explain to people the confusion over the $75,000 and the $100,000?
Oh, sure.
Thank you.
The estimated cost for the entire design project would be about $100,000 or less. When you hire a designer, you're hiring them based on their qualifications to give you good specifications and good construction oversight. And you're not hiring them based on a fee initially right away, because you're not treating it as a bid service. You're paying them for their intellect more than the actual physical work that they're going to perform. So, in our instance, when you post what the job is, there's a designer's fee in the register, and I put negotiated estimated to be $100,000, just so they have an idea of how much we're willing to spend. The $75,000 would be the work that brings you right up to the construction phase, approximately. About 75% of their work is the design, and about 25-30% is the construction management and closeout. So that's why it's there. That's the difference between the two. And
So if the debt exclusion does not pass, we'll spend no more than $75,000.
right, and there are milestones that you put into the project where they get paid as they close out each milestone, and there's a dollar figure that they'll probably propose and we'll agree to. That's pretty standard practice, whether it's an architect for a building or a public works project or a field.
Thank you. And if the debt exclusion does pass, up to the remaining $25,000 may be spent for the engineer during the construction process.
That's correct.
Thank you.
This is all brand new to me. I am learning as we go, and, I have three things that I'm looking at. Safety first. I want to make sure that whatever we're using for fill is safe, and so I'm keeping myself busy reading a lot of information that's being sent my way, which I appreciate. The other thing I'm definitely big on is the cost. I don't want this overriding everything else, so I'm going to be holding feet to the fire to make sure we can do this as cheaply as we can and yet still keep it very, very safe. And then the third part is the design. We talk about the walking track, we talk about having community be involved with that, and that's a really important part of this project, I think. So those are my three big ones, but I'm learning as we go, so pardon my ignorance, but I am trying to research and learn as we go. It's brand new, in my world anyway, so I will be asking a lot of questions. I've already been picking Matt's brain about all of this, so unfortunately, you're going to be stuck with me for a while until I get caught up. But safety is definitely the number one thing right now for me. I want to make sure that we choose the correct material. So that's my 2 cents.
Okay. Kelly?
Matt, I know that Newburyport is using the EnviroFill, which is like a plastic, it's not cork. It's kind of covered, it has similar kind of, it's non-toxic. Have you reached out to them? I did call them, I know their Park and Rec, kind of, not their school was in charge of the creation of the different fields that are using this. I didn't hear back from them, but they said they would get back from me and talk about what that process was like for them and how they came up with using that fill versus the other one. I know that there was, I'm not sure if there was like a town meeting or something about that, but I know that that was like paramount for them in order for them to move forward with this. I know for myself that's important. I don't know, I feel uncomfortable about the fact of kind of paying money for something that we don't know is going to happen. I just think it feels strange. It feels like I'm, paying an engineer and an architect to build a house on a piece of property I haven't bought yet. And, I feel, and I'm not sure as someone who's kind of heading the charge for this, spending your time doing that where we have so many other things happening. I don't know, I know as a committee, we voted, there was a motion to support this if it passed in town meeting, but that was before we saw the commissioning report and had more information about other things that for our schools. I'm just kind of talking out loud right now, trying to figure this out, because there's a lot happening, and right now, nothing is happening because there is no debt exclusion, there is no excess funds. So the question is, you're saying it is only $100,000, but $100,000 could probably pave, a lot of roads, which seems to be what people talk about most.
I didn't mean
That's
to
it.
imply that it
No,
was a small
no,
amount of money.
No, it's not a small
Okay.
amount of money,
No, and
but,
I agree
I mean,
with you.
in the whole scheme of things, it's a small subset, but I don't know, I don't really know where to go from here. In any guidance from people who've been on committees and so forth can speak to this.
I think that this,
Yeah.
kind of reliving the past here. And as I've said a couple of weeks ago, I think that this thing kind of just fell into our laps. I mean, we weren't planning on doing this. This wasn't even on anybody's radar necessarily. It was on the capital planning list, because I was on the capital planning, the first iteration of that group. And it was on the list with like about 25 other things, but they hadn't rated them yet. They hadn't said, this is number 1, this is number 10, this is number 25. I have no idea. So this thing just kind of fell into our laps. So I think that's one of the difficult parts here, and I somewhat agree with Kelly that, you know, we just talked about the commissioning report, and there's $1.7 million on that report, and now we got 1.9 million or whatever potentially for this field, this synthetic turf. So, I mean, I'm kind of struggling with it too, but I do think, just to kind of maybe answer Kelly's question, I think through this design process, I think that some of those questions will be answered. That's why I was asking that question. Do we put the two different options? Do we go with a rubber pellets or rubber material in the design part of it and the cork part also in this? Or do we make that separate when we meet with the designer and they kind of explain the different materials that they're familiar with? They may have additional information as far as the health hazards. I did see a letter that somebody was sending around, I think it was from Medway, Mass, that the Mass Department of Public Health had actually done a study on the rubber material, and they said that it didn't cause any harm. But then you see these other reports that say, that kind of contradict it. So, you know, I just don't, I'm not really sure. I'm not a medical expert. I'm not a epidemiologist or whatever. So I would just basically say, I think the longer this takes, the more we can research it, talk to the designers. The designers have done this. They're much more familiar with it than we are. I'm sure they're going to come in and make a recommendation. They may even recommend a material that we haven't even considered yet, because we have some elements out here, whether it's the water, the wind, the rain. So that's gonna kind of change it for us with the drainage. So I think there's a lot of questions still, but I think at this point, we're just really scratching the surface. So I don't know if I answered your question, but that would be my spin on it.
I totally agree. Sorry, go ahead.
Two things. One, the Medway, Department of Health that replied to Medway, that was really a limited overview of just the basic inconclusive tests that they've had. Congress actually put forward to the EPA, I think it's November 14th or something, that they want clear answers. I don't know if that's even possible, because again, there's just not enough data out there. Two, I mean, along with the health and, you know, the discussion on cancer, but there's also the whole discussion of runoff. I mean, we're right here, we're a peninsula. There's not a lot of fields that are in the same element as ours in terms of environment. That would be something that I think fields in.
That'll be part of the permitting
Yeah.
process, whether it was a grass field or a synthetic turf field. The drainage and the runoff is always, you know, one of the things that they have to go through before they can break ground.
Also, I'd be curious to see kind of an overview of, once this field is built, what does the yearly maintenance look like? Because I know our yearly maintenance was limited. What does it look like now in order to maintain our warranty, to maintain the longevity of this field? I know Cohasset said if they were to do anything, they would get their own like little John Deere tractor to make sure that they are pulling the, you know, equipment behind them, which is like every 3 or 4 weeks, in order to redistribute the crumble of whatever sort, whatever infill you use will need to be constantly kind of groomed. Also, too, the fact that they're dropping crabs and other things out there on our fields, that probably doesn't happen to a lot of other fields. Seagulls, you know, like use our fields for dinner. So I think there's just a lot of questions, and I think David's right. We'll get more information as we start this process. It just feels strange to start a process before we know for sure that we're going to build that. It just feels kind of, I'll say it, it feels silly. It does. And I know that I'm probably, you know, not very popular right now, but that's okay. It just feels silly. It feels like I want this piece of property. I'm going to go home and pay all this money for my house, and I really hope they let me buy it, type of thing. And so
I wouldn't call it silly, but I totally hear what you're saying.
Yes.
I do.
If I were going to propose myself to embark upon this project, it would not have been the way it's gotten to us at this point. A lot of basic, due diligence legwork in just about any other project would have already been done by now, which, as David said, has basically been dropped in our lap to do, which we're going to do. And one point, not only, I've scraped the surface of doing research myself, and even within particular manufacturers of synthetic turf, you'll have a dozen different types of infill. The options are endless. Honestly, from where I sit, I can't imagine using the crumb rubber at this point, not because I think it's unsafe or causes cancer, but because maybe it's because I'm an attorney and it's my nature, but I wouldn't even want to deal with that problem. If there's an alternative, why wouldn't we possibly use that? And just eliminate the whole issue. Cost might be the problem. We'll find all that sort of stuff out as we go through this process. Which brings me to another thing. Maybe it's
Eric,
because...
I'm sorry. I just had a question for you. Why do you think it's better we do the RFP?
We do an RFP as opposed
Yeah.
to just picking a designer?
Or haven't, see, I had asked Matt, when this all came down and the group came forward and they wanted to do this, I assumed wrongly that they would be the ones doing all this work. So I'm interested to hear your opinion on why we should do the RFP.
Why we should do it and not the community
Yes,
track walking
yes.
field people?
I think the short answer
And I
is
mean,
because
we own the
it's
property.
their property,
Yeah.
yeah. it's
Right.
We
the
own
school
the
building.
property. A
You voted to accept
citizens
it, so-
group cannot be paying the bills and overseeing it. And if the citizens group, as well-meaning as they are, if they make an error, it's quite different and it's more likely to happen than if the school committee were to.
Okay.
I think most importantly, at least from my perspective, is that if going through this whole process of due diligence, we discover a problem, an issue, something that we're not comfortable with, we can stop the project dead in its tracks and that will be done. It'll be over.
I see.
It's completely within the purview of the five of us. I wouldn't want to leave that to somebody else because it will have an impact on the school department for
Okay.
sure. But getting back to my thought about how kind of all of the options are on the table, it was first kind of brought to my attention, and then I noticed it myself. The actual motion that was approved at town meeting was kind of like what I was reading from before. It was moved that the town appropriate $1.925 million for the construction of a community walking track and turf field on property located at and adjacent to the Hull High School located at 180 Main Street. And then it goes on from there. It does not say synthetic turf field. It does not say artificial turf field. It does not say grass turf field. It simply uses the word turf. And under the circumstances, I think it would behoove us to look at all of the options and, as part of our due diligence, do all of our homework. Just in case, being a super nerd, depending on what the word turf means, I went to Merriam-Webster. And the first definition of turf is the upper layer of ground that is made up of grass and plant roots. The third definition of turf is a material that looks like grass, and that is used especially to cover athletic fields. So I would not say at this point, at least in my opinion, that grass is 100% off the table. I think that it is something that we need to look at. I'm not advocating that. I honestly don't think at this point it does make sense for us. But I want to be able to demonstrate that and prove that as we have to make our case to the people of the town. So that's one of my concerns in the RFP, in that it kind of seems to prejudge that on page 4, the second paragraph under general background, the statement, it is not cost effective to properly maintain the grass fields at the expected quality of field high school athletes and youth sports play games on in the region. Additionally, the athletic campus does not create the intended image for athletes, staff, spectators, and other visitors.
I'm going to say goodnight.
I don't necessarily disagree with that, but I don't know that at this point we actually can prove that. And so I'm not sure that that's really required in here.
Okay.
I think we should probably just remove that and do the legwork. It's entirely possible that it's not cost effective to maintain the grass of the expected quality due to the extreme use gets and will need, and the environment and all that, but I want to be able to prove that. And my other big question was about the time frame.
Did Maggie get what you want struck from the RFP?
Oh, well, I was just mentioning, I don't know that we really came to a conclusion yet.
Okay,
This is, at this point, is my opinion.
she was doing, okay.
In terms of the timeline, I know everyone, I don't want to dawdle on this by any stretch of the imagination. And I know the expected time frame was to get this, all the ducks in a row. It passes, the debt exclusion passes in May, then after graduation, which is June 4th, 2016, at that point, the field's open, could be, isn't being used. You can do all this work and have it ready for school starting in August. I think that's probably a best-case scenario. And as you even alluded to in here, it's entirely possible that that's just not possible. I like what you were saying, that it's better to listen and instead of try to mandate a schedule, to listen to what designers and then bidders are going to talk about in more terms of reality. But I wonder if we need to either make it more explicit or change it. I know that you had mentioned in here an alternative schedule with completion in November of 2016. I know there'd been thought that if it's possible, the contractors won't be able to line up the work, and so we might have to do it during the fall.
That is something that we had talked about at the administrative level, and then in conversations with designers about for feasibility of it. They were pretty positive because they said, well, you know, anywhere from 85 to 95% of the work, everybody wants their fields done in the summer when sports seasons are not really in session, and they want it open on August 15th. But this, you still have from August 15th through Thanksgiving is a perfectly good time to do the construction of the fields. If that's something that interests you, there's less competition. You know, there's less projects at that time, so you'll have more competition as people are trying to line up their second season of field work. So depending on how that would impact our costs of the project and the quality of the project, that's some feedback, me personally, I think the committee should have for, you know, hear from the designers. And maybe that's not the way to go, but I did want to try to, you know, I don't want to force the project because we probably could force it, you know, with the debt exclusion to hammer it in and squeeze it in that time. But when you rush things, more mistakes tend to happen or get sort of covered up.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think anybody wants that. If we're going to do it, we really want to do right by the citizens. They're going to use the field for a long period of time and have it be safe and last as intended.
That's exactly what I heard you as you were describing this on the front end. I just wonder if the language in the actual RFP should be more open-ended.
I could make it as such, or I could just delete the timeline and have them recommend it. It's just, for me, it's a little bit easier to evaluate multiple proposals if they're working on one of two timelines, and if they want to submit an alternate, or we discuss that in interview, that's easier, because if it's open, then instead of apples to apples, you get apples, oranges, grapefruits, and bananas, depending on what their schedule is for work and what would be most advantageous for them, sometimes. And because if we're not saying we want it at a specific time, they're going to pick a time that's more advantageous for them. So I was trying to balance the two, so to speak.
Actually, as I think about this now, it's probably not as doesn't have as much of an adverse impact to put that sort of timeline in, because this is, at this point, just the designers. And it's really the construction bids that are going to have more of a timeline sort of element.
Right, and there's a difference, obviously, in having construction documents ready, to have a contractor ready to start in June you know, you'd want to have the designers, and my experience and understanding with it, is those bids that, you know, they want to have them go out somewhere in January through the end of February and open them and award them in March or April, so that they line up their work for the summer. Our timeframe for the planning aspect of it is shrinking as the days go on, and I don't want the designer to feel too rushed to make it happen either. The total quality of the project, for me, and I think for most folks, is the priority. Although I understand folks have wanted this for a long time, and they want it to happen. Some folks wanted it to happen yesterday, and I understand that and respect that. But I don't think anybody, myself, and I don't think anybody up here wants to rush it to sacrifice any of the quality of the project. But
I completely agree.
I could be mistaken.
And I would even think if it happened next summer as opposed to this coming summer, it's not the end of the world. Getting it right is what's most important. And as long as people understand that that is really our objective, I think that will benefit the entire town as we go through this. Any other comments or questions?
I mean, Matt, do you actually think we'd get it done next summer, or are you thinking more towards the fall or the next year?
Oh, we could get it, you know, next year, if we wanted to line it up now, we could do that and have the documents done and ready, and we could be, you know, we could have our bid out in December and be the first ones out for the following year. Do I think we'd get a better project? I mean, they're only gonna spend so much time to do it right. We just don't want them, we don't wanna shorten their window to do it. Because if we rush the designers, the chances of them not giving us the best quality that we deserve increases. And for the contractors, I sort of see the value of doing a fall construction, but there's an added cost to us, obviously. And
All the games are away then.
we become road pirates.
Right.
And that's something that I think the committee needs to reflect on and talk about, and we can come up with an exact cost for that. But again, this is where you're putting a little bit of trust into who you're gonna hire to give you your best advice, but you don't have to just take the one person. This is where I think there's real value in the interviews. You ask them all the same questions, and you see what you get for answers, and they might be consistent answers, but the best ones will kind of rise to the top with the way they answer the question and give you a little extra insight, or for lack of a more diverse word right now, a little more value for what you're paying for.
Okay.
Otherwise, I think the RFP looks good. I mean, the way you wrote it, I like, I hear what Eric was saying as far as, I think those were good points about the construction May to September or August to November, but I think that's an option. I mean, and I think it's better to have those dates in there, like you said. I think you gave an excellent explanation on that, so. As far as I'm concerned, I think the RFP itself can go get advertised, but that's just my opinion. I don't know what the other folks think.
Yeah, no, you changed my mind when we came to the timeline. I would still just ask that we take those two sentences out of that second paragraph on page 4.
General background, I have no problem with that.
Yeah.
On page 4.
From it is not cost effective down to spectators or other visitors.
Okay. Thank you.
So do you want a motion, or Kelly, you have any other questions?
Nope, I'm good right now.
So yeah, I think at this point we will need a motion to, oh, I'm sorry. Just procedurally, we're going to have a motion to approve
I think you
this
should.
RFP?
Mm.
Yes, Mr. Forkham.
Just a couple of questions. All due respect, Mr. Gullis, I'm not really familiar with your background. You mentioned you've been in school business administration for a long time. Have you presided over a replacement of one of these fields before?
No. I wrote the replacement for the turf field on my way out the door at Milton just before I came here. So I wrote they had an existing turf field. The drainage was good, and we hadn't really had any problems. They just had the turf in itself, and there was a foam pad underneath it. And I think it was about 11 years old. And They ran it into the ground because they don't have a lot of fields like a lot of places. And so it'd be run on Saturdays and Sundays, and we rented out to Boston Rugby and everybody else, you know, if there was time and space available. And they probably could have maintained it better. They did have a wagon, you know, they would drag on a tractor that would sort of fluff up the grass again, which is what Kelly was referring to as a typical part of maintenance. And they didn't do that as frequently as other folks. You know, how well you maintain it and the quality of the product are two of the key things in there. And then the last one is the quality of the craftsmanship and in the construction to make it work. So I put together that bid spec, bid it out. It came in pretty much at the price that was expected, so the replacement for it was about $425,000. And I've only heard good things, that they had no problems with it.
The reason I asked was I'm just curious where the budgets came from for the 75,000 for the designer, the to 1.9 million for the replacement, which is over what was in the capital outlay budgets by I think $200,000 or so. So I'm just curious if we're talking to vendors already. That's where we're kind of getting these estimates, or if this was just kind of a back of the napkin type thing. Just
yeah, no, I wouldn't go with the back of the napkin for a public.
Okay, so I'm just curious where the numbers.
How I came up with the numbers. I did talk to designers.
Okay.
I talked to contractors that install the fields, and I talked to my colleagues, you know, in school business that have also done fields in the last few years, and sort of triangulated the numbers.
Which designers did you talk to?
I've spoken with Gale Associates, Activus, and Huntress Landscape Architects. They've all done more than a few fields, and I got the names of those folks, that those designers from my colleagues, where they had had a field done, you know, more than a couple of years ago, and were satisfied with the work and the way everything had come out. When it comes to this type of stuff, I'm not a, oh, if it's brand new, we gotta try it. I want the tried and true with a little bit of track record, so that we know it's worked somewhere else. I mean, the last thing I wanna be is first with a new product. I wanna know that it's been working for a little while. And I think most designers, you know, they like to be able to tell you that they've worked with this product and that it's got a decent track record. So, yeah, the project budget is not the back of the napkin or envelope.
I think Eric actually answered one of my other questions, that we'll be soliciting a natural grass bid as a result of your reading of Article 6.
I don't know procedurally how to go about it. I'm not sure if that's something that this particular designer that we're looking at can do as an alternative, or if we go just looking for.
I mean, it's an RFP for the designer at this point, so it would seem like we haven't made that decision yet, right? I mean, my simple mind may be wrong, so please feel free to correct me if I'm wrong there.
No, I mean, we can certainly ask the designers what the cost would be to design a grass field as well as a synthetic turf field, both on their time for the design work and the cost for the materials and the construction. That shouldn't be too hard for us to obtain.
Okay. And then the last question I had, and then I have a comment, is
because
you mentioned,
I'm sorry, just because the designers that are in this business, they've done both.
Okay, great. I just wanted to make sure that that was the desire of the committee, that we're going to submit both as a result of that reading, because it seemed like everything was for artificial turf. To your point, the way the RFP was written was, I don't even want to hear our natural grass, I just want artificial turf. So, am I correct?
I don't know that we're going to go for a construction bid for turf, but I certainly want to have the due diligence done on the front end to decide which we're going for.
Okay, you just move, everyone. Seriously, stand up and move along.
See, we're so energy efficient here at Hall High School that it thought we were all gone.
I've never had that happen before.
The last question I had is, you mentioned the property. The reason why the school committee is running kind of the field replacement project is it's your property. How do you forecast providing for student security with the community walking track open during school hours? I mean, are you guys gonna create some type of firewall so this way people walking on the track don't have access to the school?
I think that is really to be determined, but
I think that's an assumption that, has not been reached by the school department, that that the walking field will be open during school hours. We certainly plan to meet with the police department about student safety. We have physical education classes out on that field, so I would think that there should be a reasonable expectation, a decision has not been made, but a reasonable expectation that when school is in session, the walking track, the track itself will not be available for community use during school hours.
Okay. And then just the last comment I wanted to make is kind of dovetails off what Kelly brought up earlier. I mean, it seemed almost, we were talking about a $1.7 million project around bricks and mortar and envelopes. Yet here we are talking about spending $1.9 million on a football field that precedes all of that. That just doesn't quite sit right for me as a resident of the town. I think there's so many other projects that are worthwhile, even within the school community, that we're prioritizing a project very prematurely. We don't know what type of material we want to use from a litigation perspective. We don't know really the budgets of this project. I still am concerned and cautious about the scope versus the costs, because if we start to look at more environmentally friendly fill, that's going to drive the price up potentially. So I think we're steamrolling ahead very, very quickly on this project, ahead of other things. It just seems wrong to me. I'll use the word silly. You said no, I think it's silly.
I would only respond that the we in this scenario is special town meeting.
Well, the board accepted this, the Board of Selectmen accepted this, we all shortcut the process, which was the Capital Outlay Committee. The Capital Outlay Committee was designed to identify prioritized projects on this, around the needs of this town. So the we is, the boards all pushed this through to special town meeting. Didn't we have obligation of that?
I completely disagree with that description of how this all came to be.
But you have accepted the project. You've accepted.
We accepted the project. It
Okay,
did
so
not
you're on
come.
board with this. You're on board.
Well, we've talked
Well,
at
the
length
committee
about
voted-
what.
the committee voted
We're
about
not all
it
gonna
for
talk at the
special
same
town
time.
meeting, right?
I think we said that we're on board as long as the debt exclusion passes. I think that some of your concerns, I don't want to speak for the whole board, but I think for probably half the board, we share the same concerns that you have. And that's why I've always said that we kind of got this dropped in our lap, because we weren't the ones out there, or at least half of the people on this board, we weren't out there advocating for this project. So I think it's really up to the debt exclusion. I mean, if people are against it and they don't get funded with the debt exclusion, then it doesn't happen. If we go through the design and we go through conservation and there's some problems with the drainage and there's other issues and it goes beyond the $1.925 million that was appropriated, it doesn't happen. So there's still a couple of times where you get the bite at the apple, but like I said, I think this was kind of dropped on us. We accepted the project, but it was voted on at town meeting, although again, I want to open up wounds on that, but I don't really necessarily agree with the way it was done, but that's a whole nother discussion.
Preceded town meeting, correct?
What's that?
Maybe I'm wrong, but you guys' vote preceded town meeting, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so-
Yes.
Adrian, 16 Douglas Avenue. Actually, just a clarifying question and a procedural question. Knowing that you accepted and you say it landed on your lap and you voted on it, can you as a committee say maybe this is not the right time and undo that vote and say, we've got 1.7 million in preventive work to be done on these buildings. We're probably going to have to go to the town for $1 million of that, which you might get 700 from the state. Could you, at this point as a committee, say, maybe this is not the right time, maybe we should push this off for a couple of years, get a lot of the preventive work done to the buildings? It's just a procedural question, I don't know the
I think
answer.
procedurally, we probably could.
And that could override the vote that happened at town meeting?
It wouldn't override the vote at town meeting. It's that
Because you're having to.
any use of town property, anything that has to do with school property is the sole purview of the school committee.
So you could take that under consideration if you want to. And second part of my question, which you kind of brought up a little bit about the Conservation Committee. So as you go through this RFP, obviously the Conservation Committee has to take a look at this, because it's not just the drainage, but it's also.
We have to get all the permitting, so.
The
That's one of the requirements of the
It is.
designer
That's in
to
the
get all the
RFP.
permitting for the project.
Because I
that they
think one of
design.
the things, and I know Kelly, you were alluding to, you have the Seagulls Knob, it's not just you have a lot of high winds down here, and those pellets actually raise with the winds, and they can go into our oceans, and they can affect our oceans. And we saw last year with the 9 feet of snow that we actually had to get permission from the state just to dump our snow into the ocean. So those pellets will be flying out a lot of times. I saw them recently at Harvard Stadium, and they're pretty, they bounce all over the place. So I just want to make sure the conservation is part of that.
They definitely will. Oh, yes.
Joe Berkeley, I'd just like a little clarity. Is the committee resolved to spend the 100,000 or not spend the 100,000 until after the debt exclusion vote?
I suspect that we, in a few moments, will have a vote to whether we're going to proceed with this RFP for design.
Yeah,
I think,
because
might wanna
I
show
just want to
procedure.
follow up on that a second. It just feels like it's bad form to spend the 100,000 when a lot of people are struggling to make both ends and meet in the middle. A lot of voters feel like their vote was stolen at town meeting, so I think to proceed as if that vote was a good faith vote and it really represented the voice of the people is bad form. So if we need $1.7 million to fix the roof when it's raining, or $1.9 million, or whatever that number ends up being, to spend 100,000 on a project that may not occur, that's based on a debt exclusion, that was based on a motion to reconsideration at 12:30 in the morning, when a lot of people feel like their voice was taken from them, it seems like a bad investment when we're not, the coffers aren't overflowing.
I respect that opinion. It's
I
perfectly
think
reasonable.
part of the thing too, kind of, for me personally, I'm not gonna speak for the rest of the folks, I mean, kind of preaching to the choir here, but I think what happened, and I'm not exactly sure of all the procedures, but the town manager basically, at one of the advisory committee meetings, said that he had $100,000 from some other project, I'm not even quite sure where it came from, but he basically had $100,000 that he was willing to put towards the RFP and the design of the synthetic field. So I think some of your questions really have to go to the town manager. Again, there was decisions made before it got to the school committee. There was a town meeting, obviously. I'm not saying whether the vote was right or wrong. You know, we can debate that. We can all have different opinions on it, but
But you have the right to decide if you will spend the $100,000 before the debt exclusion vote occurs. That is on your desk. The buck stops with you on that decision. That's pretty clear.
I think so. I mean, it's $75,000. I think that extra 25 is for the construction over, the construction management part, but I hear you. I mean, did you have a comment, Mr. Gales?
No, you just said
Okay.
what I was going to say.
You know, it,
Why don't you guys just think about this before you do it?
well, I think we are. That's
I-
what we've been doing
I don't
for
think we
about the
can
last-
make, I don't think we can make a motion of anything. It's only the three of us now.
Okay.
We
we have
can,
a-
Yeah, we have quorum is 3. Quorum is, well, one more than half. Yeah, Mr. Ford.
So, you know, you mentioned in an answer to Sinead that you guys have the ability to stop the project. Does that require a citizen's petition to get the board to do that, or is it something you're gonna vote on now, or? I'm just asking procedurally, I just don't
I
know.
would think procedurally at any point through the next 8 months, if someone's going to make a motion to some effect of that, and it's seconded and voted on by 3 people, that would be the
And
procedure.
can that be a citizen petition, or is that?
No.
Okay,
That's
So you,
the
one
board.
of you guys would have to submit.
Right.
Okay.
I think, just to, where I'm thinking, I hear Kelly and I hear you, Mr. Berkeley, about spending money on this at this point when we don't have the final bonding authority to pay for the construction of the project, and that it's certainly not the optimal scenario to go about this. But I do think that it's clear, I mean, we could walk over there right now. That field is a mess. I want to go about this in a methodical way, consider grass, consider all of our options, and whether the debt exclusion passes or fails, something's going to happen there. Whether it happens this summer, whether it fails, and then we take this up again in 3 years or 2 years or whatever. I don't see that as having a designer really work through this and getting us, this board going through the due diligence to get that field straight. I don't see that as a waste of our time and money. I agree with you. This is not how I would propose to do a project like this, but it's kind of, this is the hand we're dealt, and I'm trying to think of the best way to go about it. So, that's where my,
Thank you, Eric. I think, you know, I mean, it's just a bad situation, I think, all around. And in the end, it was never, again, I'll say, you know, I'll reiterate what I said before. I don't think it's a question of merit. I don't think anybody here is gonna look out on that field and say, that field's awesome. You know, that's not it. But when I sit back and I think about this, and I mean, obviously, I sit on sports, so I think about this a lot. And I think about the money we've put in over the past, you know, X years to maintain that field. And I think to myself, you know, I had this discussion and I said, you know, my husband, I said, you know, I could probably build a house. I could watch some YouTube videos and whatever, and it would be okay, and it would be well enough, like whatever. I could build one of those tiny houses. And so, and I think about our field, and we just had the athletic director, who I know, who's wonderful, but he's not a landscaper. And we have the facilities here, but they're not landscapers. I know in Situate that Little League alone, to maintain their field, pays $40,000 a year. That's Little League alone to maintain, I think, 1, maybe 2 fields in Situate. We've paid, what, $48,000 in like X amount of years, maybe $8,000 a year. So just that differential there makes me want to pause for a second and say, you know what, that field does need to be addressed. No one's saying it doesn't, but could we take this, like, I don't know, money that comes out of nowhere, this money that Lemnos found, and put it towards actually having a landscaper come and do this for 2 years, and then if it turns into this big dust bowl that it is now, then say, you know what, we did our due diligence. We tried to do it right with the experts maintaining the field. Again, I could be talking silly, it's okay. And then, you know, now let's go forward with the synthetic turf field, because we tried to maintain a natural turf field, which is not the Lowe's variety seed, but is actually different. I mean, 17 out of 32 NFL fields are natural turf. So, and they're maintained, and there's turf managers, and there's people doing that. And it's not, you know, we're all trying to do the best we can. It's not, well, why wasn't the field maintained? But, you know, things happen, life goes on. You try to just do the best you can with what you have. You know, and now we're faced with this big decision that feels strange and weird, putting the cart before the horse. Could we step back as a committee and say, you know what, we're not saying turf is wrong, but can we do due diligence with the field and have someone professionally come in for a year or 2 years, and maybe the professional comes in and says, listen, I could do this, this, and this, but you're gonna be back right here, you know, but we had somebody repoint the field, we put our money in, but then nobody, and I could be wrong, because again, I'm new to the committee, and, you know, I'm just learning information, but we really don't put that much, you know, love and care back into the field. Like, when the game is over, does somebody go out there and start kind of like addressing the field? Does somebody go out there, I know, hold on, and I know that I've come up here on windy days, you know, and the water is not going on the grass because it's hard, this is a hard area, you know, but nobody's going out there to say, wow, it's really windy. We should probably move the water because it's gonna go this way instead of watering the street. Like, because that's kind of, I don't know. These are just my observations, and I want us to have a good field. I love sports, but I want us to be smart about this. I want us to start making smart movements, and like, start making smart movements that help everyone in the whole town. I don't know. That's just my rant. Thank you.
Can I go? Matt wanted to say something.
Well, just, Jim Quattromoni, not after every game, but probably maybe on a weekly to a bi-weekly basis, does go out and add grass seed to spots after the games at night to try to keep the patches, the dirt patches as small as possible to try to keep the seed going. It's not for lack of,
No,
complete
I
lack
don't
of
think so.
effort on the school's
No.
part to try to maintain the field.
It's a part-time job. I think we would all describe it. The work he's doing is admirable to keep the field to where it is. But it's a part-time job. We didn't install that field right, to my knowledge. We don't have sprinklers, so it's not.
We do have sprinklers.
We do have sprinklers.
Yes, we do.
That are running.
Yes.
Okay. So I mean,
And we maintain them every year. We go through at least 1 or 2 sprinkler heads that, which is kind of normal for a field that size, that freezes up over the winter and we have to replace it each spring.
Just wanted to go back to that.
I hear what Kelly's saying, but I will have to say that there's been probably, in the last 8 years or 10 years, since the high school was finished, the field was finished, I'd say like at least 2 or 3 times where there's been different iterations where either it was youth football or the schools themselves, there's been different groups that have tried to repair the field. And to be quite honest with you, the biggest problem with trying to repair that field is it's overused. Because every team wants to, and you gotta remember, you know, when you guys have probably heard this story 900 times, but basically, when I was a kid, you had football, you had baseball, hockey, you had like 4 sports. Now you have soccer, but not just soccer, you have girls and boys soccer, girls and boys lacrosse. So the field, there's never any time with a regular grass field to do any of the maintenance, because they have to use it all through the fall, then, you know, the last game is Thanksgiving. Now you really can't do any maintenance on the field for the next 3 or 4 months till you get to March, but as soon as March shows up, now you say, I think the next sport is like lacrosse. Then lacrosse starts up. So the biggest problem is they have, you know, different groups have tried to repair the field. However, the field is overused. And that is one of my fears with this synthetic field, because, you know, one of the things they may say is that it's the life of it may be 15 years, but the way we're planning on using it as a community, we're gonna overuse it so the life might only be 12 years or 10 years, I don't know, whatever it is. So, I mean, it's just so many different questions, but I think, you know, I think Eric brought up some good points. I mean, I think, you know, at the worst case, I'm not keen on spending $75,000 and having a designer come out here and design a synthetic field and stuff. But the one good thing, I guess we could take away from this, if we do this, if we put in the 2 or 3 options, whether it's rubber, cork, or a grass field, is at least if we end up not doing it because it's too expensive or whatever happens, we'll at least have some solid numbers. So when we go back to the capital planning committee, we can say, listen, to do it with a grass field, yeah, it's gonna cost $400,000, but then you're gonna have all this maintenance, and then you're gonna have all this overuse. So that really doesn't work for us. But the synthetic field will have an actual cost. We'll know, hey, it's $2.3 million. Okay, we didn't have enough money to do that this time around. If we wanna do it in 2 or 3 years, we know already kind of what that ballpark number is gonna be. It might change a little bit based on the economy, but basically, we're gonna have something coming out of the gate. So I hear what everybody's saying. I don't want to spend $75,000 or $50,000 or whatever it is. But I think the only way I can kind of rationalize this in my head, to be quite honest with you, is that at the end of the whole thing, we'll at least have a design, whether we do it now or we do it a year from now, we'll at least have a better number when we start talking about it. So that's the only thing I can say.
And we're gonna have real information on how to go about it. Just to respond to a couple of your points, Kelly. I know a lot of NFL teams do have grass, but I remember when there was grass here in Foxborough in this kind of climate, and just the football team and the soccer team playing over there, that field was a disaster, and they obviously have a much greater budget than we could ever have to maintain, and they couldn't maintain that field, and that's field turf now. What David's saying with overuse, I mean, I'm sure the Situate, my kid played on the Situate Little League fields. You know, there you have a single field that's got a very defined limited use, and those fields are very well maintained. Our Little League teams pay a lot of money to maintain the L Street field.
Oh, they do? Okay.
And they still have a very limited use compared to what goes on over here with 3 levels of football games and everything else. On your idea of taking the $75,000 or $100,000 and using that instead of design, use that to improve the field, we can't do that for the simple reason of how that money is. That money that has been made available by town manager is from a previous bond issue that was voted at town meeting about 4 years ago, and that had to go, like I read what this new thing is for, that had a very limited definition, and it had to do with town building design studies. That's, you know, that's where, you know, the money to fund the current town building studies coming from that old bond. You know, it's, that money, that particular pool of money is not available to do this. I just wanted to say that. You had a question,
Eric,
Mr.
thank
Weber?
you. Thank
Yeah,
you
sure.
for just clarifying that.
First of all, Kelly, I mean, very nice suggestion. It's kind of, it's out of the box. I think it's interesting. And again, I'm urging you guys to just to think out of the box about this project. Secondly, we know that debt exclusion, it's a big thing. I mean, if the town gets behind the debt exclusion, I would look to what Matthew said earlier. I mean, there sounds like there's some critical safety issues here. You've got leaking roofs, you've got masonry coming off buildings.
We don't really have a roof leak.
Okay, so, well, whatever it is.
We don't at the moment, we haven't for a little while. We've got a compressor that's leaking onto the roof, and
Okay,
we've
There's
got to
critical
address
infrastructure
that.
concerns.
But
right. So if
water is not getting into
right.
the buildings from the roof.
So all I'm
Either-
suggesting is that if you want the town to get behind you, and I think the town wants to get behind excellent projects, is give a little bit back to the town and say, look, guys, we've got these huge maintenance projects that we'd love to get to perhaps first. We can see what's in front of us, and we can get it done, protect our kids, put a roof over their heads, make sure no one's getting killed by falling masonry. And yet we've got this other project that we're going to spend $75,000 on. You're going to talk to a conservation committee, and it may never happen. And then where are we? You've lost the town right away on the debt exclusion because you're just not giving a little bit. That's all we're asking you to do, is to think a little bit more about what you guys think is important. I really think the stuff that Matt has laid out tonight is critically important. Far more important than a playing field.
The prioritization. I would classify it and say, we all agree the field's gotta get addressed. But where does that fall on the list of priorities? And is there a lower cost, high quality option, which I believe there is with the football field? Because the school committee submitted that to the capital outlay committee as a backup plan. You have two items in the capital outlay committee list of projects. One is for the artificial turf, and one is for the natural grass. I will also mention that you guys budgeted about $125,000 for that project to totally rip out that turf and replace it. So for what we're basically earmarking for a design, according to the budget you guys submitted to the capital outlay committee, we could replace the whole field.
I think it was for a recrowning.
Yeah, that's not even close to what it would cost to really fix that field,
Okay, so
you- I think
even to
it's
make
to-
it grass.
I think it's to
Even
fix
using
the
numbers that
ground.
were presented at special town meeting of 350,000, that's still fractional. And we get so much more bang for our debt exclusion dollar. We get a brand new field for the kids, we can do other projects in this town, and I believe that the town can coalesce behind that. I think that's a happy medium. But what we're doing here is gonna basically, I believe, strike a death knell for that debt exclusion.
Well,
I
I
mean,
think
we'll
that,
see.
I think, you know, everybody talked about that at town meeting, and I think that everybody's talked about it on Facebook, everybody's talked about it here, everybody's talked about it everywhere at the coffee shops. But the bottom line is that I know you guys don't like this, and I'm not necessarily saying I like it, but it was voted on, whether it was 12:30 at night or not, it was approved. And so the vote is, this is what they said, this is what we want to have on the top of the list. I don't necessarily agree that this should leapfrog all those other projects, but it has. And it landed in our lap, and I think that because town meeting voted on it, we're kind of stuck with it.
So Mr. Twombly, I'll again say, according to what we heard earlier, now this sits with you folks. If you feel that, you should be voting no on this next motion.
Well, I just feel that the reason why I would vote for it is because town meeting voted for it, and I think that if people decide they don't want to do all the capital plans, they don't want to follow up on that, then they just vote down the debt exclusion come May, and this doesn't happen.
Because you're not prepared to give. You're not prepared to give. That's
I'm
all we can
prepared to
say.
give.
I think a debt exclusion would pass hands down if you were
may
prepared to
not.
work with
It
the
may
rest of
not.
the town and go, look, there's critically important projects to be done first, all around the town.
I don't know if we're sure if it would pass also if they took the field out of it. Maybe all those folks.
If you got the message
vote
out to
against
the
it the
town
other
that you're
way. Who
willing to
knows?
work with the town, perhaps the town might help you get the debt exclusion passed.
So I would just ask.
We're not all
You
just
know,
gonna
I
keep
feel like
talking.
we're back at town meeting. I mean,
know.
all these
I'm not even talking
arguments
about
should have
town
come up at
meeting.
town meeting, and
If you feel
I think you
that-
did actually
if you
bring all these
feel that-
arguments up, but I think you're kind of preaching to the
I
choir.
would just ask if you feel that the field is being prioritized misguidedly over other projects, voting yes, because it was voted at town meeting, why are you voting on this then? If town meeting was the ultimate arbiter, why even have the vote?
Because the majority prevailed at town meeting.
So why are we even having the vote here? Why not, why is
We're
it
just,
an
I'm
automatic
just
yes?
voting on the RFP. I'm not
Honestly,
voting
we've been
on,
talking about this
I'm just
for
talking about the RFP.
better
tonight.
part of a
Come on.
couple hours, and what we're about to have a motion and a vote on is whether to embark upon the design of this, of fixing the field. All the options on the table, grass, synthetic, everything. What I'm prepared to vote on is to get information. Whether it comes to pass is going to be determined, but I can't imagine why, under the circumstances, voting to get information, to get real numbers, to do the due diligence on this project, I don't see that as a bad thing.
Mr. Hardy.
Oh, yeah, Mr. Hardy.
Hi, Thomas Hardy. Given the clarification, and thank you, Eric, Mr. Hipp, for the clarification on what it is that you're going to vote on. I'm going to ask you directly as a concerned taxpayer in the city of Hull that as a committee, you pass a motion not to move forward with the RFP. And additionally, in a qualitative sense, all of you please keep an open mind to the discussions that we're trying as a group of concerned citizens to feed a dialogue about considering other capital projects in the larger picture in the town. And that if you demonstrate, I think, flexibility in that regard as a group and as individuals, and we can have that calm and civil discussion, that will come back to the board in spades later in terms of goodwill. You know, I always use an example in discussions with other folks around town. If we did one thing in this town, the mood and the goodwill of the town and the citizens would go up tremendously. And that would be just paving down the center of Nantasket Avenue and making that safe and presentable. Doing something like that, or prioritizing that versus doing this, and it's not unimportant. The field has to be safe, all of that. But showing that flexibility and maybe creating a situation where we can prioritize differently than where things are now will come back to you in terms of goodwill tremendously. And I offer my personal guarantee as a citizen that would be the case. I can't speak for everybody, but I think everybody would agree with me on that.
I would tell you this, I could not agree with you more, that I can tell you, I am the school committee's representative on the Capital Outlay Committee. And my number one priority for what the debt exclusion funds will be spent on is paving roads. Because I really believe, I've believed for years and have been saying to anyone who would listen, that if we don't do the basic things like paving our roads, improving the appearance of our town. I mean, one of the biggest issues facing the whole public schools is our declining enrollment. Part of that is clearly driven by the lack of families with school-age children in town. We, as a school committee, do our darndest to improve the quality of our schools from where we sit. Obviously, it's the teachers and the administrators that actually do that and carry that out mission. But I mean, look at this banner that I'm sitting in front of. I mean, things happen, great things happen in the whole public schools. But when I'm trying to get a friend to move to town and they drive down Nantasket Avenue to get to my house, the first thing they're talking about is, you know, do I need to have a monster truck to live here?
It's tantamount to marketing for the town.
Absolutely. But we can do more than one thing at the same time. We have the ability to walk and chew gum. There's the money that would be spent on this field is 20%, less than 20% of the total amount available through debt exclusion. I know Mr. Lemnios and the selectmen are in the process of getting some hard numbers on road paving work. There was a study from 2013 that had some numbers. There's a lot of paving that can be done through the debt exclusion. There's a lot of infrastructure needs that would need to be met. Absolutely. I mean, this field's not necessarily, as a citizen, isn't my number one priority. What needs to happen in town, but the ranking them is almost superfluous. It's going to be a part of the program. All these things are going to that's what I hope the Capital Outlay Committee is able to do before town meeting and before the debt exclusion vote, is to lay out what the entire program is. I understand everyone's concerns at this point that you don't know what that final mix is going to be. I couldn't agree more. It really is on the leadership of this town to really define a well-thought-out program of what all the debt exclusion funds would be spent on. And if it's not sufficient, vote against it. But I certainly expect that there will be things in there that will address all of these concerns that we've heard. Not necessarily every single thing. You know, town hall is sort of a separate issue. The needs for the Capitol buildings that we've heard about for the middle school and the high school tonight is a separate matter. But overall, I just hope people can keep an open mind. You know, I hear all of your concerns and questions, and I don't have all the answers today, that's for sure. But that's why I want to move forward with this, and why I'm doing all this work on the Capital Outlay Committee is because we have to get this work done if we're ever going to get anywhere as a town. And that's what my hope is. So with that, I don't know if we want to have a motion now, or I would entertain the thought of having the motion with all 5 of us here. But I'm also perfectly happy to go forward right now.
I have no problem waiting for them, but it's just gonna, I mean, for lack of a better term, I mean, the heat's not gonna get turned off. I mean, the heat's just gonna keep going up, so.
I agree, and I don't,
It's kinda like kicking the can down the road.
I honestly
I
don't
mean,
think that
I mean,
the
I
other
don't
two
think
being
that they're
here
gonna
would
vote
change
any
it.
differently.
No.
I don't know what to tell you. I mean, I agree with everything that everybody said here tonight, but I think that the bottom line is that 280 people voted for it, or whatever the number was, and then 180 voted against it, but then they did the reconsideration and it passed. So I think, I just feel like based on that town meeting vote, that's where we have to go.
I think delaying it gives Matt some difficulties.
Well,
Well, delaying it would give us,
Not necessarily mad, but it
Right.
potentially delays the
Yes,
project.
right.
It's,
I think, and I mean, I voted no when we first did this, but I think right now, in terms of, listening to Eric and his side and just gaining more information, even if we don't go forward with this, starting this process is information gathering, and having information is important. I'm feeling. And that it goes for grass and it goes for turf, and it just, because like we all know, that field has to be addressed and this process has to start at some point. So so Eric, thank you for that. So.
okay.
okay. So I'd make a motion to approve the RFP with the changes that Eric outlined on page 4, I believe it was, with those deletions.
Yes.
I'll second that.
Okay. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It is unanimous. Thank you very much.